We don't really have an introduction other than to say that we are very grateful that you are supporting the Iowa City Book Festival, our pride and joy, the UNESCO City of Literature. And we also hope that you will enjoy this very particular experience. It is, in fact, the very first time this poem cycle will be performed in English. So you are part of a very special event, and thank you very much for coming.
This is Sea of Fate by Bejan Matur. Sea of fate, of non-existence, of death. For this sea will bear us, for the angel will appear. We are made in encounters, for being means limits and death. Those seen from the sky are seen by God and only God. Death divine under his immense eye flings us from being into nothing. On this odyssey, we are with God. In thus undoing, God is with us. Continents gather around us. The Holy One has called them. He desires the same deaths, calls upon fate to unite in water those divided on land. Today reveals nothing, neither words, nor silence, nor even decay reveals anything. Above, the sharp gaze of the eye hones the wings of the fatal messenger. Look there, at the shoreline. The angel has come to hold the earth in balance. Issued along the fateful turns, drawn to a relentless target. This is the great error. All along whispered to us an origin story that once convinced us. The seven seas, like a mother's womb, envelop us, those of us expelled from the womb. As if running back to the womb denied to us, we hurtle toward the breaking surf. Sea of existence, of all being. Are you? Here begins the expanse of breath, of blue, of wingspan. Across the floors of the sea, the song to the anemones breaks off inevitably. For mercy, carried from the shore, is now in the heaving of the waves. Mercy, earth fading as it gains proximity. For we are a universe of atoms split from an ancient memory of wholeness strewn across a desert. We scaled mountains to reach the border as it stands of being human, drawn between death and angel. If the object between death and angel is a hand, will it reach out now? God is keen to know, weaves fate with his own hand. Our undoing is a path, our undoing a song mountains will never again hear, sorrows unseen. The earth unravels. No map will contain us on this great hunt. Loss will tell our story. Now on this path, this our final wager. Loss. The earth forsakes us, the rocks, the deserts forsake us now. So be it. The shore knows it is the Alpha, the Omega of all knowledge. Distance traversed on this journey, none. There is another distance as the soul advances, distance as it gains intensity, the land of unnamed dead, all unnamed. The constellations witness the dead emerge, the dead of passion, of conviction. Fatal religions spanned deserts end to end just to hear the scratch of fate's indelible pen. This death, a passage to the future. On this ascension in reverse, we outnumber the dead, staring at the heavens. Prophets cross our path, their sons assassins and martyrs. We salute all of them. On this ascension, no one will believe the severed arms or legs, what they witnessed. No one will believe a small child crossing the desert and his encounter with God. Answers are hidden, true, but they exist. Each one has a story, of course, each one from some mountaintop, each from the country of stones. Now we are here, ordered to stop. But why does the wind raise cuts on our faces? Why does our gaze hurt? It's the stars, they say, that make our skin radiant, the glow of starlight. We flow down deep. The deeper we fall, the wider the sea breaks open, makes way for being. If not love, what force bears us toward death? If not the yearning to be seen from the heavens? Now we are here. This, the beginning. Now, here. Loving God, simply being seen was our offense, the one that breached the ancient riverbanks. A second creation, unspoiled. God of the eyes, so pitiful and without mercy, for it's there in the gaze, waiting and everlasting eternity. Who we are is known, and which death belongs to each of us. From the beginning, minced footsteps measured our suffering. Our breath exhausts the galaxy and summons other galaxies. In this history where God does not belong to you, and you are a mere figure, sorrow is infinitely beautiful, and its beauty draws the humans, draws them in. With death starts the tally, the census of atoms, multitudinous as the galaxies. Our cells split and disperse across the seas. Our faint gaze, gossamer, clings to the soul, unloosed from the heart. The wings speak to us of the unknown. The sea of fate breaks open. The soul floods with the beating of wings. For this sea will carry us to nothingness. It will carry us to its end. Every morning intimates the soul. Every heaven-sent messenger is winged with inconsummate creation. This sea, deafened by raucous wing beats, draws the humans in, and, drawing them into the deep, it enunciates the soul, binds it to the original event, the cause of the origin. Sheaves of wheat smile at us on the rock faces. Desire becomes a hand and lays on the surface of stones. The place of endless arrivals is no longer a shore. Human border, a faint, thin line. Sea of being in unbeing. At once it whispers to us, go back. Nothing begins here. Time coils back on itself. Come down. Those wings will bear you to death. Those wings will deliver you to God's earth, blue. God's earth is blue. No doubt our story begins on some mountaintop in a village beneath an immense sky. Perhaps our kinship with the sky draws us to the blue. Blue water or sky, all the same, only death is the worthy homestead. Look then, all of us dead. I'm preparing an elegy. Here inside my rucksack, drifting with me, an elegy. For my eyes are now the eyes of nowhere. Oh God, tell me where I belong. Oh God, this nowhere, or are you this nowhere? Hoarder of all compassion, cruel God, talk to me. If this is ascension in reverse, then I am descending up, mountain ranges, summits, constellations, faraway galaxies in the chambers of your dark heart. On this ascension, the underwater caves eagerly reveal unseen stars. Unseen stars God discloses to us of nowhere, scaling down the sea falls. You, unseen stars, you, galaxies, the anemone's spell that began and ended with us. I am the one dying everywhere. Swim, says the boat's captain. Swim toward the shore. This is not an order. It is a promise. The only thing given to you. Listen, for the world is elsewhere, not the place you were shown. Go, says the captain, out there is your future, not here. Life reduced to chance, to an escape. From whom? Where to, when everywhere is gathered up inside the unknown? But now, everywhere is safe for us. For the earth now slipping from under our feet has turned away our soul long before. We disperse. We are atoms, we are dust, as true and worthy as the stars, as absolute, dust to true dust. And this oneness is our soul, bedrock, constellations, a sea in between that will drown us. Bedrock, constellations, a womb in between. Creation perpetual. And the captain says, swim to shore, go. For the arms tend toward life, arms, your breath's wingspan, past exertion, your breath's invocations calling you down, the swirls of air bubbles where the air expands with the hungry inhales of distant continents, where the eye accompanies our descent. Now the angel flexes back her wings above me. She has come to deliver me to death. Even if I turn away, a shore looks on, monitors my departure. Now, the expectant seagrass, the patient coral, will accompany our bones as the sea washes them. A voice rises and calls out the absolute, for our backbone, unloosed from the self, collapses on the rocks. Now the angel raises the dead, exalts them with her soul. We are prepared, words to say to God, and the elegy. Now the angel ungathers her wings, glides above us. This sea is the sea of prayers, the sea of being, as it ever was. Now the angel must leave me. She must shake the breath off her wings into the sea, for this shore remains unlived. Captain, too, dead. Same fate, same sea. The sky satiated with breaths, so blue it was, so blue, so blue. Ink blots awaiting to make sure survivors, those became us. Our bones yielded to the truth of the rocks, thus began the wave's silence. Pitch quiet, soundless, only the path of our descent, the impervious trajectory we carried into the deep, soundlessly. And humanity we carried deeper than deep. Our gaze held still in the ever-deepening blue. We drown, falling, falling toward God, falling toward being. Our bones will dissolve, weightless. And waiting in the deep, the corals will impart to us the wisdom of their patience. While crossing the mountains, we sought eternity at the insistence of rocks, the kinship of winds. Now the angel returns to take me away from one paradise to another. For this was paradise of waning breaths, of dying voices, of unseen gazes. The heart's paradise. This stillness, if not paradise, what is it? This deafening wholeness. We spoke with words no one else understood, heard the same words. We have no warmth left to offer each other, just words swirling among the air bubbles, words bare as stones. If I look at this face, I will understand what it means when it says, "My God." The sea is the terrain of last words. Arms sculling toward death span the breadth of a cosmos, a map to follow for human sightings. In the Mediterranean, a wave, the ebb and flow of fear, of stubborn will, a wave. The water as dark as fate, your gaze, your breath, dark. The Africa you came from is here, the Asia you left behind, caught in the waiting. Your lips had muttered the names of all the great mountains, the interminable winds. Your eyes had traced the arc of every wing that sized up the cliffs. A childhood fancy, elsewhere. From elsewhere begins communion. Is it fear, then, that swells in the water? Descending the deep, is it fear of the human ascension? Perhaps it is peace, arms flailing across the Mediterranean, a requiem, not of notes, but of gazes. What music can't do, the stars can. What music leaves undone, the stars make whole. We inhale the same breath in a narrow cell together, for we are asked to mix, to become one. It's our nature. For we were the same when we started off. The road distracted us, dispersed us. Yet we are still the same, breathing the same air, dying all the same. No. Our voices went unheard, our beings unnoticed. In this desolation, we're just as naked, trembling, afraid. The world, a fleeting fancy. Breaststrokes reduced to breaths, recite. And how it is one, our matter, our fear, and how it is one. Whoever it was that dropped the lifeline across the cosmos for humans to find knows full well those throes of death are the pageantry in the playhouse of the world. Mountains and deserts, if their convergence is worship, the breath of hungry bodies knotted in the waters is the conscience of the deep. My swaddled nothing is in peace. I am in peace as life recedes, for I spent my strength, my breath, until the end. If I am cast away, it is because remaining was drained of meaning. A child taking his first strokes with newborn instinct aims toward his mother, for in that sea, mother is God. Now I am thinking of your tiny arms wound around my neck, your angel arms, and the heart you received from me I had split in two. Your weight was no weight that tore up my arms along the journey. Now I see you on a mountain, your eyes tracing the outlines of clouds, laughing. That voice never leaves me. Come, my baby, this is our turn. Come, cling to my body, and we won't die alone. Your breath, my gift to you, won't be enough to keep you alive. Come, my baby, take up my arms with these wings. I will bear you from the rocky abyss up, up to paradise. That's all you wanted, a cloud, white, cotton swaddled. Now these hands that weaved that dream open, palms up to you. Trust me, your heart, your wisps of breath, the song I will sing to you in paradise, and come, my baby, this death has been our religion, this death our faith in the world. Hands, hands everywhere. They once touched some other person. They loved once, even in famine. Now we return to the beginning. This journey is the beginning calling to us. Come, my baby, open your arms. Here is your cloud. Live out your paradise inside my wings. Truth is, it's your right. Thank you.
In the Sufi tradition, there is and this also is also in the Islamic tradition, sort of revelation comes in very small utterances, voices. And in fact, at one point, I don't know if you noticed, but there is one line, one word, recite, which is in fact what the prophet hears when the recitations begin, the revelations begin. So we try to really honor that, and I think Leigh does an incredible job in making you sense, not just because we kept shifting and shuffling. Probably you heard those. Maybe we need to figure out a way to get the shuffling to be silenced as well. But you want to talk how you read it with that sense?
Sure. Something that I think about in terms of the white space that you mention is the expansiveness that exists in this particular poem in terms of the acceleration and deceleration between the cosmic and the sea floor, and how death is both an extremely intimate space that is inhabited by one body and also a vast expanse that is inhabited by everybody that's on Earth. And the fact that the poem occupies the page and makes use of paper space in a very similar way, I find to be really fascinating, and how that can translate into performance, whether it be in the poem becoming an object or whether it becomes a breath space, like having to take a pause in order to honor that formatting, so to speak, is really, there's a lot to be mined there. And when we were looking at that in terms of translation, we were also looking at what could be imagined in that, in addition to the words that are actually there. I mean, we're both playwrights, so I will use the term subtext. Yeah, so does that answer your question? Wonderful. Anyone else?
was just curious about this artwork by Mehmet Gunyeli and why you chose it and what you think it adds and how it changes.
So Mehmet Gunyeli and Bejan Matur collaborated. These are photographs, extreme close-up photographs. Many of them, in fact, are photographs of the boats that refugees have used in their transit, on their passage on the Eastern Mediterranean or through the Tigris. Because, you know, the interesting thing about this poem is that it is at once about the Mediterranean, but also there are mountains that are being crossed, and you notice, I mean, this is as much as Abraham's wanderings as it is the Syrian refugees. So it's just this very peculiar cycle of migration and displacement that sort of marks that whole region, what Bejan Matur calls my Mesopotamia. So these are photographs that Gunyeli took of the refugee boats, most of them, and then by treating them with, I suppose, some chemicals, made them into these incredibly abstract, non-figural artwork photographs. And they had done in Turkey a reading accompanying these paintings. And also they issued a special edition of the book with the paintings. I should say that there are about 60 paintings. And Leigh very correctly wanted us not to overwhelm the words with images. We really wanted you, I mean, this is really a voice poem. I would not have been able to translate this if it wasn't for Leigh. And, you know, it has to be heard. And so we use the images then just as suggestions, as sparingly as possible. He's a very, you know, accomplished photographer who has had international shows and everything, yeah.
Well, I mean, something that I will say is I am also incredibly fascinated by how the visual arts and the literary arts can become synesthetically related, and what it means, for example, to write a painting, or what it means to do a photographic treatment of a poem that exists in both voice and on the page. And something that was really striking to me about the images was how the subject matter could be so literal, and in fact the material be so literal, and yet have transformed meaning in relationship to the poem and also in relationship to the visual interpretation of each audience member. So part of what I appreciate so much about this poem is how many, the expanses we were talking about earlier, how vast it can be, and to have that vastness be extended into the image world enriches the emotional quality of it in a very powerful way for me. I know you had a question.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, just personally speaking from experience, like, because it is a subject matter which is both accessible but at the same time uses like spiritual, cosmic language, how do you make that selection of like the right words sometimes, in just your opinion?
Well, that is something that we had extensive conversations about in the translation process of this particular poem, which was fun. I had a great time with it. One of the particular challenges is that the word angel in English has so many cliche evocations. I mean, I don't know what comes to your mind immediately, but white fluffy comes to my mind pretty quickly. Or if you lean in a very Catholic direction, potentially militant, right? And so, but the word, and I'll let Aron speak more specifically on the original word and its resonances. The word that is actually used doesn't have those kind of pop culture religious tetherings. And so we talked a lot about this idea of the messenger and the proximities around this idea of angel, like what is the actual function and action of the angel, because there are multiple voices in this poem, the captain being one of them, the angel being one of them. So what does it mean to write that as a figure as opposed to just an image? And so that was one of our major challenges that I found really philosophically rewarding in the process.
Well, so I think the other interesting thing that Bejan Matur does, and Efe, you will also know this having read her in the Turkish, she really writes in a very, very plain language. Her poetry is almost unpoetic in some ways. If you read this whole poem, maybe you will find 10 striking images. And maybe 4 of them extend to become an extended metaphor. What she does is she actually imbues the plain language also with greater resonance by repositioning these very plain words inside what obviously is an elegy, is obviously a cosmic battle, right? I mean, some of the choice lines are reserved for anger toward God, right? Hoarder of compassion, cruel God, right? I mean, but that's all there is. You have to sort of almost be very careful not to miss these very rare moments where the poet goes past the very plain language. The other interesting thing is, Melek is in fact a pre-Islamic, very, very ancient archangel that was then incorporated into Islam and obviously to pop culture as well. But the way she plays with the Melek, the word Melek, Melek also is the same root as Malak. Those of you who know Hebrew, that's also the divine being, right? So this is a messenger and also God's right hand, or God does God's bidding, right? A little bit sort of Job comes into this story. But even those, Bejan Matur was very insistent that we do not push them into any particular religion. You notice probably that we did use things like Annunciation, Ascension, Assumption. So these are indeed words that have Christian meanings. But they also have Muslim meanings. They also have Sufi meanings, you know. So in a way, the poem sort of both adds valence to these words, but also by doing so, it resists placing those words in one particular religion. Yeah, and so what we tried also to do in a very practical way, I think we had fewer angels than there are in the Turkish version. We used messenger, we did winged, right? Wings, a few more wings than angels in our case, yeah. We were mindful of the angels.
How did it feel to inhabit this poem in the process, in translation and performance?
What's interesting about it is I come from a theatrical background, both acting and writing, and it's different when you're thinking about acting in character. There is a transformation that happens through action that is often tied to a narrative, though not always. There is work that is quite abstract. But you have to approach the play as almost a score for action when you are inhabiting a character in that specific way. With this poem, what is really fascinating about it is that it requires transformation, but not the literal type of transformation that you would normally see on stage or in a film. It almost, and you know, I have had the privilege of reading alongside Bejan when she was here for the International Writing Program last year. And her process is, I mean, she's a fabulous performer, and her process is very strongly connected to reverie and to this sort of energetic, mystic energy. And so she becomes an amplified version of herself when she reads the poem. And with this, I would say that that is not what happens as somebody who is in the process but not the writer, that the transformation, when it happens more, I'll be able to put more literal language to it, but it requires the exiting of the self and entering into a new space, and also being aware too of all of the other voices that are inhabiting it without quote unquote playing them. So without taking on the captain or taking on the drowned, but knowing when they are speaking as opposed to when you are speaking, and being able to instinctually make that distinction.
I think, I mean, for me, translation itself is an embodied act. You know, I'm obsessed with sounds, and I'm obsessed with how a line actually feels inside my mouth as I'm uttering it, or through my throat. So this, because it is so spare, gives very little else. It's all in the voice, it's all in the sounds. And it was incredible. And, you know, the genesis of this collaboration also is worth mentioning, because when Bejan Matur asked me to translate this, I went home and I tried to, you know, I gave it a try, let's say, a good, honest try. A few sections I did. And then I went to see Bejan and Leigh read Bejan's poems in Kurdish, Turkish, and English. And Leigh read them in English. What I just realized is that the unit of poetry in Bejan is not the line. At most, it's the word. Sometimes it's the sound. And so I just, you know, I thought that Leigh would be my guide into this very, very, very sonic world. And the other interesting thing we wrote, in fact, in that in the program notes, both of us are admirers of Linklater, who is this phenomenal voice teacher, voice coach, who believes that emotions are all, in fact, located in our body, and that, in fact, every sound originates from certain parts of our musculature, and, you know, different emotions are, in fact, situated in different parts of our body. And all of this you know, it was incredible, joyful to have these conversations with Leigh and then go back to the poem. So in a way, what we were also doing was sort of tackling this poem from what we were seeing in it, and then having the conversations that we did sort of almost armed with those conversations, we would go back to the poem, right, to sort of really experience the sounds. Some of the revisions we did were purely for sound purposes, not for meaning. There's, yeah, I mean, you tried very hard, Leigh, but notice that the figuration came out, yeah.
Or is it a creative response that's occurring here in the audience as we experience both of these genres?
Oh, I like that second option better. It was all accidental, but you saw it, yeah?
Or maybe there's a third possibility in that we're collectively caught up in a performance art experience.
Well, I had a set of images that Leigh very promptly cut by half. And the ones that she omitted were, in fact, a little too figural. It was sort of like double narrative, right? We wanted you to experience the poem without the sort of interpretive help of the paintings. But the other way around is inevitable. That is when, I mean, that's the synesthetics, right? I mean, we're talking about the synesthesia. If the experience of listening to this poem awakens all your senses, or more than your hearing, then in fact you start seeing things in the images. But you are absolutely right. We began with images that were created for this poem, right? And there are, in fact, some images, one image that Leigh very smartly moved elsewhere. It belongs in the later part of the poem, but we're not going to tell you which one. But we moved it, right? So, I mean, we were keen about avoiding the parallel readings. But we could not avoid what happens in your mind, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, something we talk about frequently in the theater is where meaning is made, whether it is made by the playwright in the writing of the play, or whether it is made by the audience in their mind when they see the final product. And the truth lies somewhere in the middle of that, of course. The beauty is that no matter what the nature of the images were, if we showed them during the poem, there would be meaning that was made. And that is also the intention. That happens to be part of the intention of why the images were created in the first place. And so the beauty of it, to me, is this multi-dimensionality of the sensory experience. So whatever the interpretation is, the fact that it exists is all part of the meaning-making machine that we drive in order to live, right?
I should also say that you probably noticed that we did use a lot of blank spaces, right? There was no image, and usually the no image sections were in fact imagistically and narratively richer, more complex, so that we were hoping that you were more engaged with your ear rather than with your sight or your imagination. But because we were also alternating the rhythm of the images, right? There were some images that came back to back, other images that were separated. In a way, I was, and I don't know if you were, but when I was sort of testing this, the set, I was actually saying, oh, we could have put an image here. We didn't. So in a way, what I hope happened is that the images themselves became resonant. They echoed through the blank spaces. And because hopefully you were expecting an image to pop. And the more it was deferred, the more your visual mind was also anticipating or expecting, right? So that's this beautiful synesthetic space where you don't even have to see an image to see an image, you know?
So at the beginning, when you were first images at the beginning, what happened was that some people came in. The door made a squealing sound. That was very similar to an oar. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The squealing sound of the oar, and also possibly a scream, a very distant one. So that you are talking about what is happening to my mind, I didn't realize that was a door. I thought that you had intentionally also put some sound in there. So that is what happened.
Oh, this is beautiful. This is gorgeous. This is.
Yeah, and talk about making meaning, but also, I mean, this is I can't help but have fantasies about the most fully realized performance of this poem in the future. And of course, I like to keep my fantasies to myself, so I will not share them, but I do love a good soundscape. So I will say that.
Tiny things that just, well, maybe. I mean, it was very interesting when that happened. When that happened, I was like, oh no, that's disrupting. And then I'm glad to hear that. So, I mean, in a way, this is such a satisfying experience. You know, one of the reasons why I have been doing much more collaborative translation now than before is that translation is a very solitary activity. And I think this is one text that I have been involved in that has the most fulfilling experience for me, because Leigh was able to create a space that you all inhabited. And that's what we want to do in any creative arts, right? So it's really fantastic. Yes? Oh, well, it's the political reception. First of all, as I indicated, Bejan Matur herself is a politically complex individual. She actually embodies several factions that exist in Turkey: Kurdish, Alevi, left, but also this incredible idealism that makes her an activist, a cultural activist. She's a fighter of human rights and everything. And in fact, in some ways, when I read this poem, I was very surprised by it, because I couldn't see it as a Bejan poem, because Bejan Matur has a certain persona that makes you anticipate a certain kind of poetry. And so this is much more mystical. So in a way, I think she also is, so it's a little bit like the old bards when you go to see a tragedy and you know the story, you come in already with a lot of foreknowledge and anticipation. You enter this poem also with a lot of anticipation and foreknowledge about Bejan, and she just sort of frustrates all of them. And so quickly, in a matter of the first 3 or 4 pages are just tiny couplets and 3 lines and 4 lines, and you go, where are we? So almost instantaneously, she resists what she knows you're expecting. How was it received? Very humanitarian, right? Yeah. No, 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 no. Yeah. Again, even the word God in Turkish, there are two words for God. One is Allah, the other is Tanrı. Tanrı is the pre-Islamic word that still has great currency. Turks will say Aman Allah when they are fed up. Aman Tanrım when they are surprised or amazed. So there is this more sublime experiences are sort of experienced through Tanrı, something even bigger than any of the monotheistic religions. So she's definitely resisting anything particular. Thank you so much for coming. This was fantastic, and thank you, Leigh. This was a rare event. Thank you.